No video game series can truly live forever, and there have unfortunately been plenty of franchises with tons of effort put into them that have gone down the drain as the market left them behind. Well, then again, I say that there are some that seem like they can live forever, but kicking off our list today of failed gaming franchises is Epic Mickey. That's right, the first Epic Mickey was released for the Wii in the late 2010, and it was kind of a surprise hit. It was a very visually impressive game that called back to the old days of Disney cartoons from the 30s and the 40s, and it had Mickey re-adopting his more mischievous personality as opposed to his newer, more pure and lighthearted one. A sequel, Epic Mickey 2, was then greenlit and rushed through development to be released in November of 2012. The end result? Well, it was a very bland and disappointing 3D platformer that didn't have any of the charm of the original, and also, it didn't really fix any of the original game's problems. Epic Mickey 2 reportedly only sold a quarter of what the first game did, resulting in the planned sequel getting canceled and the IP being shelved by Disney. Vaulted probably forever. This month's giveaway is for a brand new PlayStation 4 console. All you have to do to enter is like the video, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, turn on those notifications, and tweet me why you want to win it with your Twitter handle included. Star Wars: The Force Unleashed. Speaking of solid first games with sequels rushed through development, how about The Force Unleashed? This game was released in September of 2010 as a single-player action game. It bridged the gap between episodes 3 and 4, where you played as Darth Vader's secret apprentice during the Purge of the Jedi and the beginning of the Empire. And throughout the game, you choose if you want to be part of the dark or the light side, and your decision would change the ultimate outcome of the story. The first Force Unleashed was a huge financial success, selling over 7 million copies in less than a year and a half. However, the sequel, it was seriously rushed through development, with reports stating that the script had to be completely finished in 3 weeks. That's absurd. The Force Unleashed 2 launched in October of 2010 to poor reviews from critics and gamers, resulting in extremely disappointing sales, which ultimately led to the third game's cancellation. And then, just as the final nail in the coffin, both games were declared non-canon following Disney's acquisition of the Star Wars license. But on a positive note, drop a like if you guys are ready for Star Wars 9, and if you're kind of feeling the Fallen Jedi Star Wars game that's coming. At number 8, Time Splitters. This first-person shooter series was developed by Free Radical Design and made a name for itself by being much more of a stylized and lighthearted game than other shooters on the market at the time. It featured a lot of time travel mechanics and creative weaponry, and it had you jumping in and out of various time periods in a fun story filled with great characters and solid writing. And of course, the shooting and the level design was very good. The Time Splitters games were also jam-packed with content and even had level editors for you to get creative and make your own story out of the game's assets. But despite the quality of all 3 released Time Splitter games, they were never really big sellers. And in 2009, the development of Time Splitters 4 was canceled, with the companies involved claiming that they would continue the project once there is a high industry demand for such a game, which they were implying that they just didn't feel the series had a place in the market anymore. And fans' hopes were dashed even more in 2013 when one of the franchise's main developers confirmed the 4th game was not in development. They even said they didn't think it would actually ever come out. Then in 2018, THQ Nordic had reportedly bought the rights to the Time Splitters IP, but so far, no actual news of a new game has come out, and I don't think it's going to. The acquisition of the IP seemed more like a business move than an actual creative one, as they likely just wanted to buy it while it was so cheap so they could possibly sell it in the future if it suddenly comes back into demand. At number 7, Bubsy. Now, in the 90s, there was a lot of mascot-driven platform games trying to compete with Mario and Sonic. On one hand, you had good ones like Crash and Spyro, but then on the other hand, you had franchises like Bubsy, which were never really that good, but they just kept on going because the publishers were convinced that they had what it would take to succeed. They just needed a colorful platforming game with a cute mascot, and boom, you win. The first 2 Bubsy games were released in 93 and 94 respectively for the Super NES and the Sega Genesis, and they were also the only 2 games in the series to get decent reviews. The third one came along, Bubsy and Fractured Furry Tales, and it was released in 94 for the Atari Jaguar. It got bad reviews and it sold less than 9,000 copies. Then there was the infamous Bubsy 3D, which was supposed to compete with Super Mario 3D, but it was executed so poorly that it's now remembered as one of the worst games of all time. Following that flop, the series went on a 20-year hiatus until 2017 when a new game called Bubsy the Woolly Strike Back was released, and once again, it was trash. Now, apparently, there has been another Bubsy game in development. It was supposed to come out last year, but it's been delayed. And honestly, I don't know why they keep making these games. The gaming world has moved on. It's time to find something new. At number 6, Banjo Kazooie. The first two Banjo games are some of the most beloved 3D platformers of all time, and it's a shame what's happened to the rest of the series. Banjo was released for the N64 to critical acclaim for everything. Its visuals, its gameplay, its world design, its soundtrack, and its great characterization and writing. Then the sequel, Banjo-Tooie, was released 2 years later, once again, to rave reviews, some calling it the most technically impressive game on the Nintendo 64. But after Microsoft bought Rareware, the game's developers got messy. A third game had reportedly been in development, was even teased at the end of Banjo-Tooie, but according to reports, it was constantly being put on hold and pushed back by Microsoft, who insisted that they make new games for the Xbox and the 360. So in late 2008, fans finally got the third Banjo-Kazooie game, and it was crap. Instead of being a traditional 3D platformer, the new game was a vehicular action game called Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. It got good reviews from critics, but fans ripped it apart. It's been over a decade now since Nuts and Bolts was released, and we haven't heard a peep from Microsoft about a new Banjo game, and if you ask me, we probably never will. Silent Hill. Now this is sad because it had such an amazing start. The first Silent Hill was released in '99 for the original PlayStation. It featured some of the creepiest atmospheric and world building in the history of the genre, all of which was expanded upon in Silent Hill 2, arguably the best horror game ever made. Now, Silent Hill 3 and 4 were pretty good, but everything changed when Konami decided to change the game style into something more modern and, for a lack of better terms, more American. American horror and Japanese horror, obviously very different in style and approach, and nowhere is this encapsulated better than the Silent Hill franchise. The series was always known for its subtle psychological horror and great storytelling, but starting in 2008 with Silent Hill Homecoming, that all changed. The game became more of an action-oriented and in-your-face, and the quality dropped dramatically. The last full Silent Hill game was Silent Hill Downpour back in 2012. And while we did get a demo for a new game called PT, the project was canceled and the demo was taken down. Now, 5 years after PT, Konami hasn't said a word about the Silent Hill franchise. At number 4, SimCity. Now, SimCity started out as one of the best franchises in PC gaming history, but it was ruthlessly murdered by EA in their attempt to make anything and everything into a live service. The original SimCity was released all the way back in 1989, and there were tons of sequels and spin-offs to varying degrees of success. But in 2013, EA decided to reboot the series into an always-online, stripped-down, buggy, and unnecessary version of the previous games, and it was one of the most notorious disappointments in the history of PC gaming. There was only one more SimCity game after the flop, and that was SimCity 2013, and the last game was a mobile game called SimCity Build It, which got crappy reviews and currently sits with a 58 out of 100 on Metacritic. And there hasn't been a new SimCity game in 5 years now, and it's just another example of a franchise that EA murdered for the sake of their live service business model. Medal of Honor. Now, this used to be the main shooter game on the market, but unfortunately, it was unable to keep up with the competition and ended up killing itself in an effort to get ahead of the curve. Sometimes innovation doesn't work. Medal of Honor started back in '99, and the first 3 games in the series were actually written by none other than Steven Spielberg, obviously giving them some great campaigns and some good free advertising through word of mouth, since pretty much anything with Spielberg's name on it is gold. However, following the success of the first few games and the introduction of some competition in the form of Call of Duty and Brother in Arms, EA clearly started to struggle. There were 12 Medal of Honor games before EA decided to completely reboot the series in 2010 and bring it out of the World War II setting and put it in the modern age. Medal of Honor 2010 wasn't very successful, but EA chugged right along with a sequel called Medal of Honor Warfighter in 2012, which was seen by many as one of the worst games of the year, and it was a financial failure. Now, more than 7 years later, EA seems to have forgotten all about the Medal of Honor franchise. So do you think this one will ever come back? Speaking of old World War II shooters, Brother in Arms. It was one of the more underrated franchises of that genre, if you ask me. The first game, Road to Hill 30, was released in 2005 as a more realistic portrayal of the war. Road to Hill 30 received good reviews and is seen by many as one of the best World War II games ever made, so this led to a sequel just 7 months later, which was also pretty good for the short amount of time it took, and then a third game a few years down the line. But After the first 3 main installments, it seemed that Ubisoft just didn't know what to do with the series, and they started making Wii and mobile games instead of any new main console and PC games. Brother in Arms Double Time was released for the Wii in 2008 to critical panning, and there was a trilogy of iOS games from 2010 to 2014 that were pretty underwhelming as well. Following negative reception and a poor public viewing of the entire series, Ubisoft canceled all future Brother in Arms games in 2015, and the franchise as a whole has been put on indefinite hold. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to drop a like on the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel with post notifications on so you always get alerted when a new video goes up and you can get that elusive first comment. And at number 1, you already knew what it was going to be. I think this has the record for the most number 1 negative spots on my list. Duke Nukem, come on now. The Nukem series released in '91, and it had a ton of games spanning both first and third person shooters as well as a couple 2D platformers, but after the release of Duke Nukem 3D, everything went to crap. Development on the 4th main installment called Duke Nukem Forever took 15 years, and throughout that time, there were plenty of other crap games that were put out. Development even stretched out so long that there were a few lawsuits involving breach of contract as the publishers had been promised a game that wasn't coming, and it ultimately led to 3D Realms losing their rights to the Duke Nukem IP, which just caused even more chaos during the development. Today, Duke Nukem are it's just another failed franchise that developers don't know what to do with. The only recent Duke releases have been remaster versions of Duke Nukem 3D, and following the catastrophic Duke Nukem Forever, I'm willing to bet money there will never be a new Duke Nukem game. And there you have it. Those are 10 video game franchises that collapsed. While it seems that every video game nowadays has to be part of a big AAA franchise, that doesn't mean all of them are success stories, and it definitely doesn't mean attaching a franchise to your game makes it invincible. So you guys be sure to let me know in the comments what failed video game franchise you missed the most, and I'll see you later.